issues such as the brain causing neurocysticercosis, which is the primary cause of epilepsy and seizures in most of the children. And briefly on the epidemiology, I just want to say that schistosomiasis is quite prevalent in most of the areas of Zambia. When you look at the global perspective, you have about 250 million people who required treatment for schistosomiasis, and at the same time 90% of those live in Africa, and of these only about 75 million people were treated. And when you look at taeniasis, you discover that this is also one of the diseases that is affecting many people, and you notice that 50 million people worldwide who actually have epilepsy and seizures, 80% of these are due to infection with Taeniasis. So these two neglected tropical diseases are actually a huge cause of morbidity and mortality. Some studies actually argue that schistosomiasis alone, the burden of it may be as big as combining HIV and tuberculosis. So this is something that is actually a huge neglected tropical disease, which is affecting most of the areas of which are actually areas where there is poverty and poor sanitation and water availability. So there are areas in Zambia, particularly in the eastern parts of Zambia, such as Sinda and Katete, which have a high prevalence of taeniasis. And then there are also areas such as Chongwe, which is in the east of Zambia, and Kafiwa, which is in the south of Zambia, where there is a high prevalence of schistosomiasis. I must also say that schistosomiasis is endemic throughout the country. Now, our thinking is this: we do realize that the drug Praziquantel is also able to treat both schistosomiasis and taeniasis. So, at the concentration of about 10 milligrams per kg, it's able to treat taeniasis and schistosomiasis. However, the primary fear is that it tends to induce what we call epileptic seizures, and this is one of the concerns that we have. Because it induces epileptic seizures, there is a direction to avoid using Praziquantel in this way. The other thing that we want to raise is that Albendazole as well is able to treat schistosomiasis. Because Albendazole is able to treat schistosomiasis and at the same time treat taeniasis, we intend to use these two drugs combined together, reducing the dose to avoid the possible complications of adverse drug effects, and try to see whether this matches up with how the standard of treatment normally works. Our hypothesis here is that we expect to see better parasite clearance, especially that these two drugs have a synergistic effect on each other. Studies have been done which actually shows that when you combine albendazole with Praziquantel, the bioavailability of Praziquantel is going to increase by as much as 64%, while that of albendazole by about 264%. And this makes the drug work very much effectively, though there are fears of things like adverse drug effects, which is something that we want to avoid, and hence have reduced the doses. So our intervention in this study is to use 20 milligrams of Praziquantel combined with 200 milligrams of albendazole. And this is what we are going to administer to our intervention group. And then the comparison group is actually going to be administered with the standard treatment. So here, we are actually proposing to conduct a parallel clustered randomized controlled trial where we're actually going to randomize a certain villages in the east of Zambia to our intervention, and this intervention, we've called it a double neglected tropical disease control package. And this package in itself includes one, the treatment itself, which is a 20 milligrams Praziquantel and 200 milligrams albendazole, and then it also includes point of care testing for antibodies for taeniasis, and this is basically just to help us realize whether somebody has a history of taeniasis, and those are the people that we want to give a lower dose to avoid epilepsy. And the third part is task shifting. So we are actually intending to use an adaptation of community-directed intervention in this case, so that we see